If I was to ask you to think of some of the greatest piano pieces of all time, there's a good chance that your mind would immediately go to some pieces that are pretty difficult to play. In fact, sometimes there's almost an assumption that to be a great piano piece, it also has to be fast or virtuosic and extremely difficult. Well, if you're in that camp, hopefully the piece today will cure you, because the second movement of Beethoven's Fifth Piano Concerto is anything but flashy. Actually, there's not a single virtuosic passage in the entire movement. However, it is one of the most beautiful, gorgeous, and I would even say greatest movements of all time. Now, being a piano player, I'm always a little cautious making statements about orchestral parts because you guys in the comments will rightfully correct me. But let's just say that's not flashy. The piano has not entered yet, but nothing the orchestra does up to the part where the piano enters is flashy at all. But it is breathtakingly beautiful. Now that hopefully I've sold you on the beauty of the beginning, let's jump ahead to where the piano comes in. Now, before we go any further, I just want to, clarify slightly. I'm not saying this is a beginner piece. This is not what you would give a student on their first lesson, right? But compared to everything that comes around it, and really compared to almost all the Beethoven's slow movements from the sonatas, this is really simple notes-wise. Of course, there's always interpretation, but that really applies to even the more challenging Beethoven slow movements as well. But these notes are not difficult. So no, I'm not saying it's a beginner piece, but I can tell you from personal experience, it is significantly easier than the first and the third movements of this concerto. Let's take a second to talk about what we just now heard there. So we had a B chord, and it went to an E chord, and then a C sharp minor. Now, hopefully your ear kind of guides you a little bit, and you hear that as a sequence, a B chord going to an E chord. Move it up a step, C sharp minor, F sharp. Move it up a step of a C sharp minor, D sharp minor going to G minor. But there is one really cool wrinkle that Beethoven threw in there. Hopefully you heard it. You have the B chord, and instead of doing this, which you could have done, right? Totally works. But the right hand keeps getting stuck on that last note before the G sharp over and over and over again. That right there is one of my favorite suspensions. At first you think it's impossible, like you can't get away with that. It's too clashy. But it works. And then of course you sequence it, so you do it again. Here it is again. The B is getting suspended, waiting to fall, because then that fits the F sharp chord. Then you do it again. You add the turn, but it's the same idea. Now that 16th note arpeggio up and then scale falling back down might look intimidating at first because, 16th notes, they must be fast. But remember, the piece is not moving at that great of a clip. So your 16th notes are not that fast. Yeah, there's a little challenge of the 3 against 4, but it's not too crazy. And then Beethoven immediately kind of pulls the rug out underneath us, right? We have transpose. So there's my version of it with the chords underneath. Basically, we've gone from the key of B, which is where we started. And now we've gone, added the 5 of 5 to hit the F sharp major. And we've gone to F sharp major. That's actually what almost every piece is supposed to do, right? You're in the key of B, you go to the key of 5. However, right after we make it to the key of 5, this happens. Everything's good? So what are we doing right here? Key of D major, right? D. The second or the third measure there is an A7. You have the B flat thrown there, but we're in the key of D now. So what is D relative to the key of B? Well, D sharp is 3, so this is flat 3. If you've been around the channel before, you know that romantic composers love the keys of flat 6 and flat 3. They're more like warm feeling. If you were in this key, then you went to the key of 5. Nothing's bad about that. It just like brightens the key. However, we're in the key of B. Then we go to the key of D. There's more of that, ooh, something magical's happening. Now right here, we're about to get this awesome build and a little bit of a piano solo, but notice that even within the solo, Beethoven keeps it pretty simple. Again, the 16th notes aren't too fast and the hands are playing in octaves. I'm laughing a little bit because, again, from personal experience, the challenge of this part is not losing track of which one you're on. And then you're playing with your concerto rehearsing partner over there, your teacher, and then eventually you just give the cue like eventually you just got to be like, yeah, I'm on beat 4, buddy. You lost track of where I was at, and I might have even lost track of where I was at. What's this? It's just our main melody, which you might not think is that significant, but think back a little bit. How did this piece start? The orchestra had the main melody, right? Then the piano entered. It was gorgeous, but it wasn't the main melody. And the piano came in again in the key of D, but also not playing the main primary melody from the beginning. Then we had our little cadenza, and now that we've wrapped back around, this is the first time the piano's gotten to play the main tune. That part right there is heavenly. The piano finally gets to play the tune, right? It's almost done with the tune, and the orchestra goes, no, I got this. Watch this. When it takes over the main tune, it is gorgeous. Now, right here, I will say, I think this, from personal experience of playing this piece, is the hardest part of the second movement. You can see how the melody, Beethoven has stemmed certain notes to kind of help you track what the melody's doing. If you just play this as blind arpeggios, and you're not aware of kind of that interwoven tune in there, I would guess it's easier. But if you're trying to focus on that, then the left hand has the emphasis in different places. It is just kind of like a tongue twister on the brain. My personal vote for hardest part would be this right here, right with the 4 against 3 we heard earlier, but I found this a little trickier. But it doesn't honestly last too long, so it's not too challenging. Okay, check out the texture Beethoven makes when we go back to the main melody. Once again in the orchestra, but the piano is going to accompany it in a different way. Check this out. I have to say that even though overall this is a great recording of this piece, I really don't agree with the interpretation here. The piano is so loud. I'm a piano player, and I think the piano player is so loud. This, I know I'm making this sound worse than it is, but it's not that interesting. Down here, we have our main tune, not even in the piano, but in the orchestra. And I want to hear that. I love recordings where the orchestra is really loud and the piano is just sort of shimmering in the background. You're like, oh, what's that magical kind of haze over all the music? It'd be very easy to flip this book open and see this page and go, oh man, there's so many 16th notes and they're nonstop, page after page, but it's not that fast. It's not that hard. And it's almost all in octaves, just as like a texture creator. So if you were just to compare this to all the Beethoven slow movements, one of the prettiest, but also one of the simplest. Once again, I know we can talk about musically speaking, it is really challenging. And there is the added challenge of playing with the orchestra. But as far as musicianship goes, just remember, yes, that is a factor, but all of the Beethoven slow movements are tricky to pull off musically, and this is one of the most bang for your buck as far as how difficult it is to play and how gorgeous it ends up sounding. If you want to, drop a comment down below of some other pieces or movements you'd love to hear me check out in a future video. See you guys.